Hey, welcome to Behind the Build. In this episode, I'm going to be discussing how to deal with criticism. The good, the bad, and the plain ugly. I'll be applying what we discussed today to art made with Lego, but what I talk about can easily be applied to any kind of art, whether it's painting, dancing, acting, sport, anything. Even things that aren't art related too, actually. Dealing with criticism from a friend, work colleague, or boss. These tips will help you out. A lot of what I'm discussing is made in strong reference to the book The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do. I'm currently reading it for the 4th time now. I'll be paraphrasing and quoting the book a fair bit, as well as adding my own thoughts and personal experiences too. So let's get started. Criticism is a vital step to improving your art. Sometimes you won't always know where to improve, and getting an outside opinion from someone else is the perfect way to do so. But sometimes criticism isn't always the best. It's important to recognize the good criticism from the bad criticism. You'll often have to sort this out on your own, in private, so that it's your own thoughts, your own feelings. How exactly do we do this? Well, the best criticism is often something that gives you this kind of beautiful sense of relief. It's this moment of, of course, now I know what I need to do. That's how I can fix that. Helpful criticism is like being given the next clue on a treasure hunt. Now you're ready to dive back in and explore. Bad criticism can leave you feeling kind of bludgeoned or bruised. It's often diminishing and shameful. It can be ambiguous, a personal attack, inaccurate, or just simply rude. Unlike helpful criticism, there's just no insight that you can gain from it. There are some rules, a sort of go-to list to follow and use when you're receiving criticism, and there are 9 rules to follow in total. This tool's really helpful. It can separate you from taking criticism personally, and instead actually see the helpful insight in it. Be careful not to judge criticism too quickly. Use this list whenever you're unsure if the criticism you received is helpful or not. Use this list whenever you've been hurt by criticism. Use this list if you just want to get the most out of the criticism that you've received. So let's cover the 9 points on that list. Step number 1, receive the criticism all the way through. Get it over with. This one's simple enough. Step number 2, jot down notes to yourself on what concepts or phrases bother you. Some of the stuff that bothers you might seem kind of petty or insignificant, but just write it down anyway. Sometimes the weirdest things can trigger long-standing wounds, so just write it down anyway. Step number 3, jot down notes on what concepts or phrases seemed useful. Sometimes really harsh criticism can have helpful glimmers of insight, and sometimes it won't. But have a think about it. Is there anything here that can actually help you improve your work? Now that we've done that, it's time for step number 4. Do something very nurturing for yourself. One thing I very much recommend is to read an old good review or recall an old comment or compliment from someone else. If the criticism has been negative and unhelpful, healing is needed. And this step is very important. Step number 5, remember that even if you've made a truly rotten, terrible piece of art, it may be a necessary stepping stone into your next work. Art often matures and grows in random and unexpected ways, and it requires ugly duckling growth stages. Remember, your art might start off ugly, but it needs to, so that it can grow into something beautiful. Step number 6, look at the criticism one more time. Does it remind you of any criticism from your past? Particularly, does it remind you of any shaming childhood criticism? If it is, acknowledge to yourself that the criticism is triggering grief over a long-standing wound. I think it's important to note here that sometimes the pain that you can feel from criticism is actually kind of rooted in something else. And so taking a look at the criticism again and figuring out if that's true here is another important step. Step number 7, write a letter to the critic. Not to be mailed. Well, maybe. In this letter, defend your work and acknowledge what was helpful, if anything, in the criticism that they provided. Step number 8, get back on the horse. Make an immediate commitment to do something creative. So take what you've learnt from the criticism and go make something. Remember, there's no use talking about it or thinking about it. Actually do it. A good idea is just an idea unless it becomes a reality. And if the criticism had absolutely no helpful information that you could glean, make something anyway. Fulfill a creative commitment of any kind. Don't let those harsh words block your creativity. And finally, step number 9, do it. Creativity is the only cure for criticism. And that's the list. Give it a go next time you receive some criticism. See how this tool works for you. There'll be a link to the picture below, so if you want to maybe print out this list and keep it on your workspace so that you can constantly refer to it, you can. Remember too, just because somebody said that they didn't like something on your work, doesn't mean you need to change it. Often when people message me asking for my thoughts on their latest Lego mock, I'll first ask them what they think about it. It's important to build for yourself. Build something because you enjoy it and then you like it. Making something to please others kind of defeats the purpose of art, and if you keep doing it, it's just going to emotionally drain you. If you've made something and other people don't like it, but you absolutely love it, well, that's fine. You're allowed to. Continue loving it, and if they don't, no, well, that's their issue. If you love it, that's all that's important. While we're discussing criticism, I think it's important to mention who you receive criticism from is just as important as the criticism itself. When receiving criticism from someone, it's important to learn who you can rely on. Creativity flourishes when we have a sense of safety and self-acceptance, so surrounding yourself with people who respect you and your creativity is vital. If you hang out with friends who subtly sabotage your creative goals or often put you down, be aware that this isn't healthy or helpful for you. Find friends who nurture your creativity and you. Find people whose opinions are constructive and those who will help your art grow. And finally, be careful not to take things personally. When someone gives you critique, think of it like a job interview. The person hiring you wants you to succeed. They want you to walk through the door and be the perfect person for the job. Despite what you think, they don't want you to fail at all. They want you to be the best that you can be. And that's the same with art. If you've made something, people want it to be awesome. People want to see you build great stuff. They want you to make something that'll just blow their minds. So know that criticism is people telling you how to improve so that you can become better. Most of the time, it's not an attack on you. And that's it for this episode on Behind the Build. Be sure to refer back to the tips and advice that we've discussed when you've received some criticism on something you've made and you want to get the most out of it. See you on the next episode of Behind the Build.